Hey, I'm back with Sleepy Vlog 57.3, the continuing saga. It just goes on and on and on. I will be talking about, I will be trying to cover more of Mark, a Ghost Critic's questions of the week, as I've been doing in the previous episodes. You don't have to have seen my previous vlogs. Basically, Mark all year long has been doing a series of videos where he asks a question every Monday for the comic book community. And I, for whatever weird reason, decided to write them all down and answer them all at once, I thought, in one video. And now I'm on like the third or fourth video. There were like 48 questions. So I will answer those, and maybe if I have time, talk a little bit about Happy New Year, everybody, and what's coming up for the next year, thinking about this past year a little bit. Or that may have to wait for another video. We'll see. My time is somewhat limited. I have to pick up my daughter from a play date pretty soon. So yeah. Oh, and today was New Comic Book Day, so let's make this my haul video. I got a big four comics. The microphone just flopped over. And really only two of them were on my pull. Futures End and Batman Eternal. Very nice Batman Eternal cover. And a big kiss on the Futures End cover. I'm pretty psyched about Futures End right now. It's been really good. And it slumped a little, it felt like, and now it's picked up again. But even its slump was very minor. And then, because I'm overdoing Batman, I thought I'd overdo it more and get Batman the Annual, even though it's written by Tinian. Give it a try. And then there's the Marvel Man Annual, the first new Marvel Man material. Miracle Man, sorry. He was Marvel Man when he originally came out in England. Since I had a lot of the original black and whites, I was just waiting till it all came out in a hardcover. Plus, it's way overpriced. It's interesting that they sell it in this poly bag because it's superhero comic with occasional bits of sex or a little bit of nudity in it, I guess. Seems like there's a lot worse in a lot of other comics that are not poly bagged. But yeah, the pricing is really, all of these have been, what, $5? And most of them, $5 for like 16 pages of the original Alan Moore period material and then extra material thrown in that isn't really what you want. So, but this has some Grant Morrison and some Michael Allred, so I didn't feel like I could wait for the trade on this. So yeah, that it may be good. It feels a little thicker than a regular comic. But yeah, a lot of that's back matter that I probably don't need. Back matter's nice on some comic that you totally worship. So maybe I'll find it to be that way, but generally I just want more comic book. There's some Michael Allred thumbnails. I guess that's slightly interesting. Sort of the stuff you normally expect in a trade, but so they're really into padding out, and maybe they paid a lot of money to lawyers to get Miracle Man, so they want to make it last. I don't think there'll be any pornographic Michael Allred art in here. They've got mature content, parental advisory all over it. Maybe because of the name Miracle Man, that it looks like a kid's comic. I don't know. So, I'm not sure. I guess, well, they must have a history of not selling many comics on the last day of the year. So, so they hardly put out any. But let me go back to Mark's questions. So the next question I believe I'm up to is the one he titled Comic Collector Archaeologists, asking what's your best archaeological find? We go digging through the back issues or searching old trades or something, and we find interesting and unusual things. And there's too many to really no big amazing archaeological finds from me, but lots of little ones that are of interest to me. Sort of the archaeology of the 80s, really, when there was a boom of smaller comic book companies, like Pacific and First. There were other times with lots of interesting archaeological things, but I've discovered a lot of that in the past year because of a store in the city next to mine across the river that has lots of 50-cent boxes. And a lot of what's in that 50-cent boxes are 80s and 90s comics. So I've picked up, like, one thing that really excited me, something that I'd completely forgotten about, but I really liked the few issues of it I read in the early 80s, was called Warp, which was this weird science fiction gods kind of comic book drawn and maybe even written by John Brunner. Is it John? I think so. The guy who was famous for his Doctor Strange work at the time, or in the 70s. And it's beautiful artwork, and it's based on this play that was done by this theatrical group in Chicago that I guess went on to be the people who did things like the Reanimator movie and stuff. So, I think it, like, briefly, like for a week, played on Broadway with costume designs by Neil Adams and stuff. So, but I think it's pretty much forgotten now, except I didn't remember it till I saw the comics. Another interesting thing that I dug up out of those bins was the Marvel Saga, which I think was from the late 80s, where they tried to turn all of Marvel Comics into one long story that, went back to the creation of the universe and stuff. I can't think of specifics right now, but there's sort of a rich undercurrent, if you're being an archaeologist, what do you call these different layers you find? There's a rich layer from the 80s of stuff that's mostly forgotten, but was a lot of interesting things going on, and you can find them cheaply. At least I can. Meaning, I'm not saying you can't, but everywhere I think where people go through find comics cheaply, they get different stuff. Like I see I don't know, I forgot his channel handle. British friend of ours who's always finding cheap comics at record stores. And anyway, reveal moments. What are your favorites? What have been your favorites? And the first kind of reveals when I think of comics come from Spider-Man, like when Mary Jane finally shows up, like Mrs. Watson has constantly been trying to get Peter to meet Mary Jane. He doesn't want to meet Mrs. Watson's dog of a daughter. And then Mary Jane shows up, and there's that famous panel, and she says, you hit the jackpot, Tiger. Even though I read that as a reprint and probably knew who Mary Jane was already, it just seemed like such a great moment. And also from Spider-Man, when Gwen Stacy died, which I also read as a reprint, but as a fairly fresh reprint, if that makes sense. Probably the first time it was reprinted, I read it. And I may or may not have known what was going to happen, but I just remember being shocked that she was actually dead. I mean, that reveal that she was dead, that he hadn't rescued her. And then also with reveals, I keep thinking of every time you pick up an issue of Saga, what's the reveal of something that's going to shock you? And I still recall, not fondly, but still recall with some kind of weird delight, the giant grotesque testicles of some giant doofy alien in Saga. I don't think that's really the kind of reveal that Mark had in mind, but that's what comes to my mind. It does seem like the pattern in modern comics because they never end, is there's always a reveal on the last page to lead you into the next page. And there's been so many reveals, that way. Oh, so-and-so's back, so-and-so's alive, or this has happened, that's happened, that they all kind of blur together in my mind. So maybe that's why I go back to those old Spider-Man ones. Let's see. Movie habits. What's the last comic book related movie you watched? That's really bad. I think the last one may have been that last Superman movie. I watched that in the theater, and now I kind of have a long list of movies that I imagine someday I'm going to sit down and watch at home. I think part of it's being a father, because I used to go to, anytime there was a science fiction or superhero movie, I wanted to see it right away in the theater. But also DVDs and a big flat screen TV, and the expensiveness of movie theaters and sometimes the annoying things that can happen there have made me really enjoy watching things on DVD. And now I don't feel in as much of a rush. I think the last superhero movie I watched might have been the second Thor movie. I've got a lot to catch up on. But I think what I really enjoy is going back to, I guess, all those 90s DC cartoons. And most recently I've been watching a lot of the Superman, I think it's Paul Dini who did the Superman also. And it's very Jack Kirby inspired, and I sit back and watch it and say, oh, that looks like a Jack Kirby design. That looks, So I like those cartoons seem to do a better job of superheroes to me than anything else. And then he talked about Nuff Said. There used to be this series of, I guess, once a year, all the Marvel comics would be silent comics. So what title would you like to see a silent issue of? And we had that fantastic silent issue of Batman and Robin. Although I heard some people say that it was pretty much a reprise of a silent issue they did the first time Robin died, but I missed that. I was sort of thinking I want a silent issue where the writer has still done a lot of work. I think in the old days I thought silent issues were the writer being lazy, but I could imagine Charles Soule or Jason Aaron or Rick Remender doing a really good silent issue at the appropriate time. So I was imagining a silent issue of the Swamp Thing or of Jason Aaron's Thor, but it would have to be by these writers, or a silent issue of Black Science or one of Rick Remender's books. Let's see. 2 teams in a tag wrestling match. Superhero team and a villains team, or it could be some other combination. Who would win and how? I'm not very versed in the world of professional wrestling, so I don't have a deep picture of it. I'd kind of like to see Doctor Doom and Calabac versus the Blue Beetle. No, Booster Gold and Spider-Man. So, yeah, one DC villain and one Marvel villain. And I picture a lot of buffoonery and stuff from Calabac and Booster Gold. I imagine Doctor Doom and Calabac winning in the end, except that Booster Gold goes back in time and gives Spider-Man something, which then undoes their win. I don't know. I'm sure there could be a great tag team wrestling match done that way, but I'm probably not the person to think it up. Jack Kirby. If Kirby was alive today, and I assume not a shaky old man who can't draw, because he did have trouble drawing near the end. If he was alive today and healthy, what title would you like to see him working on? And that's really hard because you'd kind of want to see him produce something new. But let's say he has to work on something current. My first thought was Justice League 3000, because that's just an opportunity to invent so many crazy things. He'd probably make it less humorous, I guess, but he could just take it into some incredible directions. Maybe Black Science or East of West. Maybe he could, or let him loose on the Manhattan Projects. Jack Kirby teamed up with Rick Remender, or Jack Kirby teamed up with Jonathan Hickman. That would be interesting. Character relaunches. What was your favorite relaunch? My favorite relaunch, this is what jumps to my mind, was Animal Man. Twice was my favorite relaunch. I mean, I was barely aware of who Animal Man was before they did the Vertigo-esque, because I don't think they had the Vertigo label yet, but it was clear that there was this line of slightly more expensive, more grown-up comics, starting with the Swamp Thing, and the Animal Man was one of the next ones after that, I think. But that was kind of this amazing new reboot, relaunch of a character. And then in the New 52, Animal Man, you know, despite, you wouldn't think after that would get another amazing relaunch, but Jeff Lemire in the first few issues of Animal Man, and then maybe in some of the last few issues, when he got disentangled from the whole War of the Rot World stuff, that was a brilliant rethinking of Animal Man, really making the family part important and really doing it with a unique voice and everything. So Animal Man, maybe Animal Man will get a third brilliant relaunch. I mean, obviously Swamp Thing got sort of a brilliant retcon in the middle of a run when Alan Moore took over too. DC or Marvel? The loser gets eradicated from all history. Okay, I read more DC right now, but Marvel would have to be the winner because over the course of my life, my greater affection, my more profound experiences as a reader, particularly as a child, were Marvel, and I wouldn't want to take that away from myself. Of course, you couldn't really, like, would Marvel ever exist if Batman and Superman hadn't been invented first? I don't think so. You know, what would the world of comics be like if Superman had never come along? Would there be comics in the United States? I suppose there would be, but it's really hard to imagine what they would be like. Comics that have fallen by the wayside from your pull list. What's the last comic you dropped and why? Well, I think the last comic I actually dropped was Wonder Woman. I gave the new creative team one issue and realized it just didn't work for me and that was kind of a waste of my money. But I never say never. I can imagine coming back and realizing later that they were doing something interesting, and I might come back to it, or years from now I might decide, whoa, I really like David Finch's artwork, because I really don't like it right now, especially his drawings of women. I also dropped Batwoman, but I knew in advance I was going to drop Batwoman. I liked the Gail Simone run too much, and I read enough about where they were heading, and so I dropped it from my pull list, but I actually have continued to buy issues so far, so I don't know if that counts as a real drop. I think it's a interesting experiment they're doing with Batgirl. Did I say Batwoman? I meant Batgirl. I always say the wrong thing when it comes to those two. So a lot of stuff has fallen by the wayside. A lot of Image, a lot of DC, a lot of Image gets picked up, of course, but I try a lot of Image, and sometimes I jump the gun and put them on my pull list and then take them off. Sex Criminals, I read the first arc and I felt like I'd had enough Sex Criminals. And Lazarus, another one that I dropped during this year, I thought was extremely good, but was just hit my depression button in a way that I just didn't feel like having it pushed. Where do you get your primary comic book news from? And it's kind of a mishmash of Twitter, because I follow a lot of the comic book community people on Twitter, and sometimes they'll start talking about something, and I'll say, wait, what happened? What just happened to Superman and his underwear? And I'll go look on the news sites and figure out what they're talking about. Sometimes I get some news from YouTube, from you guys, and I also glance a lot at CBR and a little bit at Bleeding Cool, both of which are very unsatisfying news sources. Bleeding Cool because they're just trying to make trouble, and a lot of what they report on is just, I don't even know why I'm supposed to be interested. CBR, most of it's not really news. It's like, here's another preview, etc. So you have to look really hard for the news. I kind of like things where they put out statistics and I can just look over the statistics myself. So I'll pore over sales statistics and things like that if I happen to have the time, just as I don't know, a way to draw conclusions myself about things that are going on in comics. I like looking at the advanced solicits to sort of see that, although that's real dangerous because you get things ruined for you that then you wish you hadn't. What scandalous thing should Image do to keep up with Marvel and DC with their Spider-Woman and Harley? Probably when he asked the question, those things were really big in the news. You know, when Spider-Woman looked like she was naked on the cover presenting her hindquarters to somebody, and when Harley Quinn had a scratch and sniff marijuana issue. I think actually, you know, Image has been doing a lot more scandalous stuff with their comic book. Sex, Black Kiss, I think was S&M porn, or I don't know, I didn't read it. Sex Criminals, I guess to compete with Marvel and DC, they're going to have to do something really obviously sexist. So all I can think of is, does anyone remember the Gore novels, a series of S&M science fiction novels from the 70s, I want to say? I can't believe that there was never more complaint about them, but their basic tenet on this planet Gore, the men knew the secret of women really wanted to be slaves. And there was long, especially in the later, like I read these when I was 11 and 12, because at first they were like sword and sandal adventures on another planet. But slowly the S&M, which I didn't understand, got bigger and bigger until I stopped reading it when, you know, many long chapters were describing how to tame your slave girl. So, you know, if Image adopted those or did some other book that, you know, claimed that women really want to be slaves, I think they could up the scandal quotient. Otherwise, you know, all their naughty books don't seem to get the press that Marvel and DC do. What comic book character that is not currently being used am I missing the most? The first one that pops into my head is Light Ray from the New Gods. They always bring back Orion. And as a kid, I really liked Light Ray, but probably if I went back and thought about it, Orion is obviously the interesting, complex character with lots of conflicts within himself. And Light Ray was just his counterweight, his counter. But I always thought he looked really cool as a kid, and I just liked his positive liberalness and his, you know, he was anti-violence and stuff. And I want to see them bring him back, and some clever new writer should be able to find something to do with him. Here's a question I probably didn't write down very well because it says, what attracts you to issue number 1 of something coming out now? I don't know if he wanted like an example of a specific issue number 1. Like there's a whole bunch of issue number 1s coming out from Image in the next few months. I made a list of them somewhere, which I don't have in front of me. I remember one of them was a Grant Morrison one. I just picked up They're Not Like Us because it was a number 1, had an interesting looking cover. So what attracts me to these is partially Image, and that each new number 1, obviously, there's a chance of something new and cool. And Image has often delivered on that. And you know, Marvel and DC do too. So I think what attracts me to it is a sense of art and writing. I have to see a little bit of the art and think the art looks cool. And I have to have some sense that there might be a good writer on it. But I think the art comes first. Superhero team-ups or superhero versus a Halloween monster. I think that's another one I didn't write down well enough. But I'd like to see Robin, the Damian Robin, versus Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, something like that. Or maybe, you know, Swamp Thing tackles Godzilla. That would be fun. We already talked about team-ups before in another question, so I think I'll just go with that. And then you had a question titled Sophie's Choice. One publishing house has to die, one lives, and one is frozen for 50 years. And the three publishing houses are Marvel, DC, and Image. So who do I sacrifice, and who do I love, and who do I put on ice? I think everyone right now is going to say Image will live. And then the choices between DC and Marvel. Before I chose Marvel when it was Marvel versus DC, but because my love of Marvel's mostly in the past, and I've kind of become more interested in DC lately, and DC's, I've been looking back at DC too more, appreciating DC more than I used to overall. So I would freeze DC, and I can still read the back issues, and then when I've caught up on all the back issues in 50 years, they can unfreeze. So Marvel dies, because I've had enough Marvel. So I'm sure that won't be true forever. And there's, you know, some of my favorite comics right now are Marvel's. Do you feel you have to legitimize comic book art in your reviews and videos, or comic books as a literary form, I guess? And, you know, do we get too academic about it in some of our YouTube reviews, or too serious about it instead of just having fun and treating it like entertainment because we're worried about what people think about comics? And you know, one thing, I jumped into YouTube, and I've done it. I'm well into my third year. I'll be hitting my 3rd year anniversary, I think, in April. And I think one reason I jumped in is because here I can talk to people who just assume comics are good. But I still think in the back of my mind, I mean, I've just lived my whole life with having to feel a little nervous about letting people know that I like comics. And even though comics are more acceptable now, I feel like people I meet accept the fact that I like comics, but there's also just a friendly little snigger at me behind the scenes. So I think that subconsciously it's just there. It's part of the background noise that my comic book life exists in. Yeah, there may be more young people. There's certainly more young women than older women who don't immediately think you're an idiot because you read comics, and younger women who actually read comics. There's very few in my actual peer group. And I did, like, my wife has a book group that I kind of sit in on, and I've had faces made at me at the mention of comics sometimes. Doesn't stop me from mentioning them, though. So I just think I think it's there. It's in the subtext of things. And maybe, you know, now there's a defensiveness over the fact that people watch the movies but don't read the comics. So there's a certain angle in people talking about comics saying, you know, you like superheroes, so here's all these really cool things. Let me tell you about how cool they are. And that's kind of a legitimizing also. A Christmas gift for a comic book character. Now, I remember what I actually wrote in Mark's comments. I said a trampoline for Ben Grimm. And I imagined some trampoline that's big enough and strong enough for Ben Grimm to bounce around, and I just think of him as kind of this funny but maybe slightly depressed character, and he just needs that lightness of jumping on a trampoline. I think it would be good for him. And his last question, I feel like I must have skipped some, but oh well. I'm going to have to go soon anyway. His last question was something about, what were the highlights of the year for you? So very open-ended. And probably as we look back over the year, it's hard to really look all the way back to last January to now and evenly balance things. So I'm sure my highlights are affected by what I've read more recently. But some of the highlights of this year feel like things, more good things that I could read with my daughter. It recently ended, but there was The Return of the Tiny Titans. There was the Lumberjanes, which is just a really awesome, original, unique comic that is all female. It doesn't go in your face and say feminist, feminist, feminist. It's just all female. It's cool. If my daughter doesn't see any subtext to it, I see a little bit of subtext to it, where that they're doing this specifically to be all female. It's interesting when the male Boy Scouts do show up, and they're very neat and like to bake cookies and stuff. But it's just a great story, and when you read the first 8 issues all together, they'll be coming out in a trade soon. Stuff that seemed a little random at the beginning all totally made sense at the end. So that was a big highlight for me. We've had 3 issues so far of Little Nemo Return to Slumberland, and that's just an amazing all-ages book. Other highlights of the year in general of the Shaky Kane issues that came out from Dark Horse. I think there were 2 of them during this year that just were a hell of a lot of fun, and although full of retro nostalgia, were just totally unique to Shaky Kane and his collaborators. And the same could be said for I'm not sure how many of them came out this year, the Richard Corbin, Edgar Allan Poe books. I know we got a few this year, and we had a few the year before. Ongoing series include a lot of Image books. Until a few months ago, I would have said Black Science was at the top of my list, but that sunk a little. Just started reading in trade Rachel Rises, but that's definitely a big highlight of the year. I also consider Clone a big highlight. It's been a highlight of the last few years. And Alex and Ada was a huge highlight of this year, I'd say. Yeah, so those are some off the top of my head. So thank you so much, Mark, for doing your question of the week. As I think I said in another video, can't wait to see how you're going to. He's threatened to continue the question of the week, but do it in some way differently. So really look forward to that. I had copied down all the questions in rough notes, and Wednesday Serial said he wanted to do it too, Matt. So I sent him a copy of all the questions. He did an hour-long video where he answered them all, and it was very amusing and interesting and intelligent and goofy all at the same time. So I'll put a link to that down below. I'm really looking forward. This past month I haven't been able to put up as many videos, but I'm really looking forward to continuing the steady output of videos and doing hopefully more hangouts. Scheduling of the live hangouts with other people is always difficult. The easiest person is Travis, because at least he's in my time zone. Yeah, this has been a really rich experience, so I don't see any stop to that. It only gets better. Sadly, some people have left, but new people keep coming, and some of us keep staying, like good old Ghost Critic. And so we getting more and more variety of voices, meeting people from around the world. We got some friends in Sweden now and everything, and that's really great. in the world of the comics themselves, I'm kind of, I'm seeing, I think DC's move to LA and their, what are they calling it? Not the Crossroads. Their big event that they're doing while they make their move, the 2-month event. I think that's going to kind of belly flop and not sell so well for them. And I think DC's market share is going to shrink. And they're probably going to be going through weird stuff as they get under new management, in a sense, of their LA bosses will be breathing down their throats. So I think we're going to see DC floundering during the next year. And I think Marvel's going to come on strong because I think that Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars event is going to be one of their most successful events in a long time. It's got the nostalgia factor. It's got this clever thing of folding in repeats of all the other events. And Jonathan, I think it'll be right up Jonathan Hickman's alley, and it'll be, he's gotten pretty dry, but I think it'll be his big Marvel achievement. And so I think Marvel will have a stronger year this coming year, but that will cause them only to raise prices even more. I think Image will continue to have a strong year. And I kind of see Image raising, all the tide rises, all boats, raising the indie tide in general, that all the indie comics will be selling a little more. I mean, I know I'm looking around beyond Image saying, well, what other good things are there out here? And I'm looking more at IDW and more at Boom and more at Dark Horse. And I think IDW and Boom both have some really good stuff. Their pricing makes it a little harder. Dark Horse, I feel, is, other than their Mignolaverse, is struggling, but I think they'll start finding their footing better in the new indie or smaller press world that's becoming stronger. And I think they're going to be helped by the increase of the new readers are going to be more attracted to the indies to a degree. On the other hand, I think digital is floundering a bit because of what Amazon did to Comicosity. And so I think that digital isn't going to be pushing as many people back into comics as they have been in the past few years, because it's going to be harder for people to buy comics on their iPads, for instance. So the digital world is a little bit fractured at the moment. I'm sure it will come back eventually. It's not going to go away, of course. I think that, hopefully we'll continue to see, like with Ms. Marvel and the Lumberjanes and other things, we'll continue to see all kinds of interesting permutations of comics by women, comics for women. Batgirl also is an interesting thing, even though I'm unhappy with it in many ways. I think some of those will be duds, and some of them will try too hard, and some of them will just be their own unique voices, which is what I think my favorites are, like Lumberjanes and Ms. Marvel. So I'm look forward to that. It could sudden transition there. I got cut off, had to run out, do family stuff, and it's a day later. So it's now the end of New Year's Day, and it was afternoon New Year's Eve when I started. But thanks to everyone for watching my videos who does watch. Thanks to Mark for inspiring this. Thanks to Matt for the similar video he did, which I said I would post down below, so hopefully I will. I wish I could go on with more predictions for next year, but with the big interruption, I'm not sure what else to say. I'm thinking about whether I have time or whether it's worth sort of doing a full-blown best of 2014, but I guess I've kind of missed the boat on that. But anyway, I am hoping, my other prediction for the year is that I will come on strong with lots of videos, and you'll be seeing lots of me, should you care to see lots of me. So happy 2015, and it's been great talking with all of you. Bye-bye.